Once upon a time, there lived a man named Kofi. Kofi was a poor fisherman and he lived in a very small village with his wife Ashante. Every morning, Kofi would wake up early to go fishing so as to meet up with his daily supplies. Once Kofi steps out of his house, his wife Ashanti would rush to her best friend's house where she stayed all day. Ashanti had a best friend named Abina and they became friends few years ago. Abina was married to a very rich man in the village and Ashanti wished she lived a life of luxury like her friend Abina. Whenever Kofi returned home from his daily fishing, his wife Ashanti would rain insults at him, asking why he chose to be poor and not rich. She would always compare Kofi to her friend's husband and call him belittling names. Kofi would most times pay no mind to her as he had gotten used to her daily banters. However, in his quiet time, her vile words kept ringing in his ears, and he often doubted himself and asked why the gods chose to make him poor and not rich. Kofi always worked hard to make sure that he provided food and the basic needs of his wife, but this was not enough as Ashanti wished to live an extravagant life like her friend Abina. One day, Kofi returned home late at night after his day's work and met no one at home. He yelled for his wife, but Ashanti was nowhere to be found. This troubled Kofi, who began to search the whole village for his wife that night. He searched and searched and searched for hours, but Ashanti was nowhere to be found. Then Kofi decided to check Abina's house to see if Ashanti was there, but to his surprise, Ashanti was not at her friend's house. Kofi decided to head back home to see if his wife might have returned, but he met the house empty as Ashanti was not home yet. Several days passed and Kofi had still not heard from his wife. So Kofi decided to journey to her parents' home, which was in the neighboring village, to see if Ashanti was home with her parents. And to his greatest surprise, Ashanti was home. Kofi was relieved to have finally seen his wife, as her whereabouts troubled him for days. But Ashanti was not pleased to see him as she began to yell and rain insults at him, saying that she was no longer interested in their marriage. She called him all sorts of condescending names and wished she never married him. But Kofi pleaded with his wife and even began to apologize to her for being poor. Kofi loved his wife so much, but Ashanti was no longer in love with him as she had finally met a man who promised her the kind of life that she so desperately yearned for. After pleading for hours, Kofi decided to return back home, but this was a difficult decision for him as he loved his wife Ashanti so much. Kofi returned completely heartbroken, and this affected him for a very long time. Kofi lost motivation to go fishing, and this began to affect his daily supplies. However, his wife Ashanti was so happy to be free from her poor husband. All the time she spent with her friend Abina opened her eyes to all what she had been missing. Ashanti wanted to be married to a rich man like her friend by any means possible, and the fact that she never had a child for Kofi made it easier for her to move on. Her newfound love, Kwame, was extremely rich and had promised to marry Ashante if she ended her marriage with Kofi. Ashante, without thinking twice, ended her marriage to be with Kwame. Kwame took good care of Ashante and provided her every need. Her friend Abina was not in support of her decision to leave her husband Kofi, and when Kwame heard of this, he told Ashanti to cut off her friendship from Abina because he believed Abina was jealous that Ashanti had finally found a rich man to marry. He went on to tell Ashanti to cut off everyone who was against their relationship, and Ashanti obeyed and cut everyone off, including her mother. After almost 2 years, Ashanti started to worry as Kwame was reluctant to see her family. What was even more worrisome was the fact that Ashanti had never met any of Kwame's friends or family. All she knew was his family name and the name of his village, which was many miles away from where they lived. One day, Ashanti woke up early in the morning and noticed she was all alone. This was unusual, as Kwame always notified her whenever he was leaving the house early. She waited for him all day, but he was nowhere to be found. She searched around the village, but there was no sight of Kwame, and this troubled Ashanti, who decided to travel to Kwame's village for the first time. She was reluctant to go at first, but saw this as an opportunity to meet Kwame's family. Maybe he would even introduce me to his family as his wife to be, thought Ashanti, who was so happy for this opportunity to meet Kwame's family, especially his father Kojo, who he spoke highly about. On getting to the village, Ashanti saw a very old man by the roadside. She asked the man for the house of the popular village piper, Kojo, and the man looked at her in shock. "Why are you asking of Kojo?" asked the old man, and Ashanti went on to narrate that she was looking for her fiancé, Kwame, who was Kojo's only son. The old man then nodded his head and told Ashanti to follow him. They walked for a few minutes and arrived at a very old hut down a lonely path. Ashanti was shocked as she was expecting a very big house, owing to the fact that Kwame was extremely wealthy. The old man then began to tell her that the popular village piper Kojo died 7 years ago in a fire. His only son Kwame, on that fateful day of the fire, ran into the burning house to save his father, but got trapped inside and they both got burnt beyond recognition and died. Ashanti was in disbelief as she was with Kwame 2 days ago. She tried to explain this to the old man, but the old man looked at her in shock and told her that she was probably with a ghost. This sent shivers down Ashanti's spine as everything began to make more sense. No wonder he had no pictures and never had friends. He also made me cut off from my best friend and mother, said Ashanti, who broke down in tears. She could not believe that she had been living with a ghost all this while. Ashanti returned back to her village and met the house she lived with Kwame completely empty. Filled with so much fear, Ashanti packed her bags and returned to her husband's house. Kofi was doing a lot better as his fish business flourished. When Kofi saw her, he was shocked as he never believed that a day like this would come. She got down on her knees and began to beg Kofi for forgiveness. and he was speechless as he did not know what to say. Kofi loved her so much, but it was late already. Ashante, on seeing that Kofi had been silent, raised up her head to look into his eyes when she caught sight of a heavily pregnant woman standing behind her. "Who is this?" she asked Kofi, who told her that the pregnant woman was his new wife. Ashanti was in disbelief as she never imagined that Kofi would move on so easily. She left Kofi's house in tears and went straight home to meet her mother. When she got to her mother's house, she was told that her mother passed away 6 months ago. Ashanti was so heartbroken as she blamed herself for all that had happened. News of Ashanti and the ghost spread around the village, and no man wanted to marry Ashanti because they feared what would happen to them if they married her. Ashanti lived all her life with the stigma of living with a ghost and wished she never left her husband Kofi for the rich man Kwame. The lesson to be learned from this story is that all that glitters is not gold. The grass is not always greener on the other side. So we should always learn to appreciate what we have. As the popular saying goes, a bird at hand is worth two in the bush. Always make wise decisions in life. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.